My elder sister Xuanji and I entered the palace together as maidservants. From the very beginning, her behavior was strange. She stood in front of me protectively and pleaded. My younger sister is still young and frail. The cold palace is too harsh for her to survive. Please, let me go in her place. The notoriously strict old eunuch from the Internal Affairs Bureau actually praised her. You are truly a kind and noble girl. But only I stood behind, quietly hearing the faint whisper of joy in Xuanji's voice. Perfect. This life, it's you who will serve that eunuch, while I'll marry the crown prince and become the crown princess. My lips curled into a slight smile. So, she was reborn too. Please, eunuch, I beg you. My sister is too weak to handle the cold palace. Let me take her place. When I opened my eyes in this life, I saw Xuanji shielding me with her body, kneeling before the eunuch with a desperate expression, pleading sincerely. Her trembling voice and pitiful eyes would stir anyone's heart. Even the eunuch, who had seen countless tragedies within the palace walls, paused and praised her. What a loving elder sister you are. I sneered inwardly. If she hadn't been the one who stabbed me to death in my past life, I might have believed that too. Before I died, I still remembered clearly, she had driven the blade into my chest again and again, her face twisted with madness and hatred. Why does everything good always go to you? Why do you get to carry the crown prince's child while I'm stuck with a lowly eunuch? It's all your fault. You ruined everything. I'm the one who should have been with the crown prince. The searing pain of those stabs etched itself into my bones. That's when I finally understood how deep her hatred for me ran. At that moment, the eunuch turned to Xuanji and said, Very well. You may serve in the cold palace instead. Xuanji trembled with excitement, hurriedly kowtowing in gratitude. Thank you, eunuch. Thank you so much. As I slowly peeked out to speak, Xuanji caught on instantly. She turned and gave me a sharp glare, her face twisted in menace. She hissed quietly. Say one word, just one, and if I can't marry the crown prince because of you, I'll kill you. My brow lifted. So, Xuanji was reborn as well. In our past life, Xuanji and I also entered the palace as maids. Just like now, I was assigned to serve in the cold palace, while Xuanji was placed in the empress's luxurious Wei Yang palace. The cold palace was a desolate, forgotten place. The concubines locked away there had long since lost their minds. Any maid assigned there was already half dead in the eyes of others. It was practically a one-way trip to the afterlife. Meanwhile, Xuanji became the object of admiration and favor. After all, to serve in the Empress's palace was a coveted opportunity. If she earned the Empress's favor, her future in the palace would be limitless. But fate twisted unexpectedly. Barely half a day after I entered the cold palace, the crown prince, Lin Gao, was accused of treason and stripped of his title, thrown into the very same cold palace. Naturally, I was reassigned to serve him. 3 months later, one drunken night changed everything. He took me in a moment of weakness, and I became pregnant with Lin Gao's child. Later, thanks to the Empress's relentless efforts, the Emperor reopened the case. It was revealed that Lin Gao had been framed. He was released from the cold palace and reinstated as crown prince. At the same time, I was brought out by Lin Gao. By then, my belly was already round with child. People said I was lucky to have suffered alongside the crown prince, and now, to carry his heir. They all said my future would be glorious. But what they didn't know was that this child was my second. The first one. Lin Gao had already stomped it to death. After all her scheming, Xuanji was eventually gifted to the eunuch closest to the emperor by the empress herself. Forced to serve him in private, her days were anything but joyful. In this life, however, Lin Gao had not yet been deposed, and Xuanji was once again acting strangely, fiercely insisting on entering the cold palace and muttering to herself about marrying the crown prince. Even a fool could guess she had been reborn. She knew full well that Lin Gao would soon be disgraced. Faced with her threatening glare, I kept silent. If she was so eager to marry that beastly Nyeo, I wouldn't stop her. After all, they were quite the match, cruel and twisted, just like each other. Once Xuanji's fate was decided, the old eunuch turned to me. There's still Weiyang Palace, where the Empress resides, and Songyang Palace, home of Consort Liang. You may choose one. Xuanji nudged me with her elbow and whispered with feigned sincerity. Pick Weiyang. Trust me. The old eunuch chuckled, kindly adding. You should listen to your elder sister. She truly has your best interest at heart. The Empress is a benevolent woman, and Weiyang is a fine place. As for Consort Liang's Songyang Palace, well. He trailed off mid-sentence, but everyone, even us newly arrived palace maids, had heard the stories. Consort Liang was known for her violent temper. Beatings and scoldings were commonplace in her quarters. Some even said serving in Songyang wasn't much better than serving in the cold palace. I scoffed inwardly. How touching, Xuanji suddenly full of sisterly kindness. No, she simply wanted me out of the way. In her past life, she too had chosen Weiyang, thinking it a path to power. But the Empress, though sweet-tongued, was ruthless at heart. To protect the crown prince, she'd sacrificed everything, even offering her most beautiful maids to eunuchs for their services, never sparing a thought for their lives. Now Xuanji was urging me toward the same fate, no doubt hoping I'd be handed to one of those depraved eunuchs to be ruined. Most eunuchs in the palace were twisted in their desires. Serving them was a slow, humiliating death, worse than dying outright. But no one else knew this. The old eunuch genuinely believed Xuanji was being kind and thoughtful. My answer, however, shocked them both. Esteemed eunuch, this servant chooses Songyang Palace. Xuanji's face twisted in displeasure, but remembering Consort Liang's foul temper, she didn't argue. Instead, she sneered and hissed. From now on, you're you, and I'm me. Don't think we're sisters anymore. If I rise to power, I won't spare you a single spoon of soup. So afraid I'd try to cling to her coattails in the future, she was already cutting ties. Without another word, she turned away, practically skipping as she followed the eunuch toward the cold palace. I watched her go, my smile sharp as a blade. Xuanji, Lingao, you'll both repay the blood debt of my past life. But for now, revenge would have to wait. I gathered my things quickly and followed the young eunuch from the Internal Affairs Bureau to Songyang Palace. I moved so fast he could hardly keep up, I didn't need him anyway. I had walked this road too many times in my past life. Back then, when Lingao tormented me mercilessly, no one in the palace dared to help. No one except Consort Liang. Again and again, she shielded me. This time, I'd make sure both she and her son Lilia survived. As I neared the gates of Songyang Palace, loud voices spilled out from within. My heart clenched. Had I arrived too late? Ignoring the eunuch behind me, I dashed inside. Chaos filled the palace. In the inner hall, Consort Liang's angry voice rang out. Where is the imperial physician? Why hasn't he arrived yet? Relief washed over me, he wasn't here yet. There was still time. I slipped quietly toward the doorway, peering inside. A cluster of maids and eunuchs stood trembling off to the side. On the bed lay Lilia, covered in blood. Consort Liang hovered by his side, her eyes red with worry. She fought back tears, wiping them quickly whenever he looked her way. My gaze fell on the young man on the bed. This was only my second time seeing Lilia, the crippled war god of legend. His face was pale as paper, drenched in sweat. Though clearly in pain, he forced himself to smile, whispering reassurances to his mother. A kind man, yet in my past life, he died a brutal, undeserved death. He'd fallen on the frontier, using just 2,000 soldiers to defend the border from 30,000 invaders. For half a month, he held the line so civilians could flee. And when they were safe, he was captured, beheaded, his head hung on city walls as a warning. That was the day I first saw him. A noble youth, a true Daeon's son. Far nobler than that scum Lin Gao. No wonder Lin Gao hated him, going so far as to break his legs even at the cost of his own title. I still remembered the day Lilia's severed head was brought back. Rain poured endlessly on the capital, as if the heavens themselves mourned his death. Consort Liang, maddened with grief, had thrown herself from the city walls. All the entangled karma of my past life began on that day. Today, Lin Gao and Lilia had gone hunting together. A dispute broke out. In a fit of rage, Lin Gao charged at him on horseback and trampled Lilia's legs beneath iron hooves. Because of this, the emperor stripped Lin Gao of his title and threw him into the cold palace. Though Lilia survived, his legs were crippled. He was no longer a contender for the throne. Instead, he marched to the frontier, becoming the crippled war god, dying in battle for the people of Great Liang. Loyal. Brave. Unforgettable. As for Lin Gao, the empress later helped find evidence that he had been framed, that someone had drugged the horse into madness. He was declared innocent and freed. He even wept before the emperor, saying he felt ashamed before his brother. But I still remembered that night he was first thrown into the cold palace. I was on duty. I heard him with my own ears, cursing Lilia with venomous words, furious the horse hadn't killed him outright. This time, I would save Lilia's legs, not just to spite Lin Gao, but because I knew only Lilia could stand against him. As I brooded, the imperial physician finally arrived. After examining the wounds, he prescribed medicine and hurried off with a maid to the pharmacy. Ointments were soon delivered. The one applying them was Madame Liu, Consort Liang's trusted attendant. I quietly slipped to her side and took the porcelain jar, helping to prepare the salve. Everyone's attention was on the injured Lilia. No one noticed as I silently applied balm to the gash on my own thumb. The wound on my thumb. I'd stabbed it myself with a hairpin on the way here. Just as Madame Liu was about to apply the ointment to Lilia's injured leg, I suddenly cried out. Ouch! That hurts. My voice echoed through the room, sharp and clear. Everyone turned toward me. I was still holding the jar of ointment, and in that instant, all eyes fell on my swollen, reddened thumb, clearly reacting to the salve. In the blink of an eye, Consort Liang's entire body trembled with fury. Madame Liu, still holding the jar, paled. Her hand shook violently. Then, in a panic, she flung the jar across the room. Her face turned ashen with fear. She knew. The ointment was poisoned. Consort Liang pointed at me, her voice thundering with rage. Guards! Seize this maid. And someone fetch that imperial physician back here immediately. Even if I die today, I will bring this before His Majesty. Don't tell me there's no place left in this palace for me and my son. I fell to my knees as two eunuchs stepped forward to restrain me. Wait. At that critical moment, Lilia's voice cut through the tension. Mother, we must not alert the enemy. Father placing Lin Gao in the cold palace is punishment on the surface, but in truth, it's protection. He fears that grandfather may retaliate against Lin Gao for what happened to me. If we make a public uproar now, it may only make father resent us. For now, the priority is to have a physician examine my injury. As for the salve. He turned his gaze to the still terrified Madame Liu. Please, ask Imperial Physician Tun to come. Don't explain too much. Just say that Consort Liang is overcome with grief over my injuries and requests his immediate presence. I lowered my head, silently nodding in admiration. Lilia truly was meticulous in thought. In my previous life, when this very ointment had been used, Lilia immediately fell unconscious. Consort Liang, outraged, stormed into court to demand justice. The commotion reached every corner of the harem, even I, in the cold palace, heard the uproar. The emperor, however, found her conduct unruly and unseemly. Instead of punishing the culprits, he chastised her for making a scene. Consort Liang, who had been the victim, was instead branded as a troublemaker. Madame Liu, a seasoned veteran of palace life, composed herself quickly. She understood the situation and hurried off without another word. Just then, Lilia turned his attention to me. "You may stand. You're the new maid assigned by the Internal Affairs Bureau, correct?" I bowed low and replied softly. "Your Highness, I am Ha Tian, newly assigned to serve Consort Liang." My voice trembled, my body quivered slightly. I looked exactly like a frightened young maid caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Consort Liang scowled. Such a timid girl, and yet the Bureau sent her here. Their standards have fallen. But, you accidentally saved Lier, so you'll stay to serve in the inner court. Before I could respond, Li Lie interjected. Mother, let her serve in the outer quarters under Madame Liu's supervision. Consort Liang frowned slightly, then nodded. Very well, as you wish. I exhaled in relief and bowed my head in gratitude. Serving directly in the inner court would have brought honor, yes, but also dangerous attention. A newly assigned maid with no background suddenly placed in such a high position would have drawn the Empress's scrutiny, and that alone could spell disaster. But working under Madame Liu in the outer quarters. That was different. And truly, Li Lie was thoughtful to a fault. Imperial physician Tun soon arrived. Madame Liu led me out to the outer quarters to settle in. Half a shurchen, an hour later, the physician left. Another half-shurchen passed, and word came from the inner court. Li Lie's condition had worsened. He had fallen unconscious. Consort Liang fainted from the shock, and the physician had to rush back in again. Songyang Palace fell into chaos, but Madame Liu, ever capable, managed the mess with practiced calm. As for me, I stayed hidden in my room like a proper new maid. But I knew, this was all part of the ruse. A scheme. Li Lie and Consort Liang had staged this to lull the Empress and Lin Gao into complacency. Let them believe their plan had succeeded. I exhaled slowly. Saving Li Lie's legs meant saving him, and Consort Liang. And it meant Lin Gao's road to the throne wouldn't be so easy this time. Only now did I have the time to consider my next steps. To deal with Lin Gao, and my ever-so-kind sister Xuanji. I still remembered, in our past life, Lin Gao was only in the cold palace for 3 days. Afterward, the emperor was deeply moved when the empress supposedly spent 3 days and nights copying scriptures in blood to atone on Lin Gao's behalf. Then, rumors spread, the crown prince had fallen ill from the bitter cold and loneliness of the cold palace. The emperor's heart softened. He sent good food, blankets, and servants to attend him. I was there, in the cold palace. I saw everything. Lin Gao wasn't sick from hardship. He drenched himself in cold water in the middle of the night, deliberately making himself ill just to act out a pitiful, tragic scene. Because of all this, Lin Gao, who was supposed to be suffering in the cold palace, ended up eating well, sleeping comfortably, and even put on a bit of weight by the time he came out. I sneered inwardly. Now that I'd been reborn, there was no way I'd let him live so comfortably again. For crippling Li Lie's legs, he would pay dearly. He was already in the cold palace. I'd make sure to peel off a layer of his skin before this was over. So I waited. And just like in my past life, on the 3rd day of Lin Gao's confinement, word spread through the palace. The Empress, so kind and benevolent, had spent 3 days and nights copying scriptures in her own blood, praying for the recovery of the second prince, Li Lie. When Consort Liang heard this, she cursed the Empress so furiously her voice rang through the palace. Hypocritical wench, she spat. Absolutely revolting. I knew what came next. In my previous life, the day after the scripture offering, rumors began spreading from the cold palace that Lin Gao had fallen deathly ill. Which meant tonight, there would be quite a show. I sought out Madame Liu and spoke plainly. Mama, my elder sister Xuanji is currently serving in the cold palace. I'm a little worried about her. Would it be possible to visit her, just for a moment? Over the past few days, I'd grown closer to Madame Liu. I no longer spoke to her with the same reserve. And she, after witnessing me accidentally save Li Lie, had begun treating me quite kindly. She nodded thoughtfully. Go, but bring some pastries. The cold palace is barren, little food, little warmth. Your sister's a maid, she won't be getting much. I doubt she's had a single happy day. I thanked her sincerely, though deep down, I scoffed. She brought this on herself. Mama, I added with a soft voice, I'd like to go tonight instead of during the day. I'm afraid I might disturb her ladyship if I go while everyone's about. But at night, there's no one around. Could you come with me? I'm a little scared. That was exactly my plan. I wanted Madame Liu to see Lin Gao's pitiful act with her own eyes, and pass the truth on to Consort Liang and Li Lie. I didn't want to act too directly, after all. Madame Liu nodded without hesitation. You're thoughtful, even considering her ladyship's peace. I've got nothing tonight, so I'll come with you. I bowed in thanks. At the hour of the dog, 9 p.m., I took a lantern and a box of pastries and followed Madame Liu toward the cold palace. She brought with her consort Liang's token of authority, so we entered without resistance. I might not know the rest of the palace, but this place, I knew every step of it. Madame Liu had likely never been here before. She thought I had arranged to meet Xuanji somewhere and simply followed my lead. Under my careful guidance, we quickly reached the courtyard where Lin Gao was imprisoned. There were guards at the front gate, no way to get in, but luckily, every wing had open windows. From the outside, one could see everything. I feigned curiosity and stepped toward one of the windows. Just as Madame Liu was about to scold me, I let out a soft gasp. There's a man in the cold palace. Late autumn nights were bitterly cold. Yet this man was dumping buckets of cold water over himself. The timing was perfect. Lin Gao was standing in nothing but thin undergarments, already soaked through, his body shivering. Still, he continued to pour cold water over himself, bucket after bucket. Clearly, he'd been doing this for a while. I glanced aside. Xuanji was sitting in a corner, cradling a bundle of clothes. She stared at Lin Gao with dazed admiration, her eyes brimming with distress. Madame Liu froze beside me. Then, as if realizing something, she rushed to peer into the window herself. By then, Lin Gao had put down the bucket. Xuanji rushed forward, ready to help him into warm clothes. He waved her off coldly. No need. Do you remember what I told you? Xuanji flushed, likely from both cold and embarrassment, and lowered her head. This servant remembers. Lin Gao nodded. Good. Say it again. Once you fall ill tomorrow, you must not call for a physician. Go straight to the imperial study and kneel, cry, plead. Say I fell ill from guilt over Li Lie's condition, that I haven't eaten or slept in 3 days and nights. Repeat it. This servant remembers clearly. At her words, Lin Gao chuckled darkly. Li Lie dares to challenge me. He's truly overestimating himself. Madame Liu was shaking with rage beside me. But I remained still. This was just one of Lin Gao's usual tricks. He was a master manipulator. Cold, ruthless, the kind of man who once kicked me into premature labor simply because I could no longer satisfy his twisted desires during pregnancy. Even after I left the cold palace with him, he continued to strike me whenever he was displeased. I told no one. No one, except Xuanji. She knew everything, and still had the gall to resent me. You don't know how lucky you are, she had sneered. Being disciplined by the crown prince, that's a blessing. I laughed inside. Well then, I hope she treasures this blessing now that it's her turn to serve Lin Gao. Let's go back, I said softly. We were never here tonight. Madame Liu's face was like stone as she dragged me back. I nodded obediently. Watching Lin Gao shiver in the cold, I couldn't help imagining his fury once he realized this little performance of his had failed. The next day, news spread like wildfire. The deposed Crown Prince Lingao had fallen severely ill inside the cold palace. But strangely, the emperor said nothing. Instead, a message was sent to Songyang Palace. His Majesty would be visiting for lunch. I understood what it meant. He had come to placate Consort Liang and Li Lia, to save face for the true victims. In my past life, that never happened. Back then, Consort Liang stormed into the imperial study, making a scene that embarrassed the emperor. Naturally, he lost patience with her and cared nothing for her dignity. This time was different. While the emperor dined with Consort Liang and Li Lia, Madame Liu and I waited quietly outside. The emperor began with a few words of concern for Li Lia, seated in his wheelchair. Then he shifted the topic. The terms of the governors in Liang Prefecture and Sin Prefecture are ending. As for their successors, I don't yet have a suitable candidate. Do you have anyone in mind? Li Lia bowed respectfully. Your son has heard that Tong Jing and Li Chuni are both seasoned and capable men. They've long wished to shoulder responsibility on your Majesty's behalf, but lacked the opportunity. The emperor nodded. I've heard of those two as well. Summon them to the imperial study later today. Li Lia cupped his hands once more. Your son obeys. The emperor smiled. I'm pleased you're willing to share my burdens. It brings me great comfort. It's just a pity, your elder brother. He let out a long sigh. Right then, Li Lia spoke up. The cold palace is a harsh place. My royal brother's health was never strong. He must be suffering greatly. I was troubled when I heard he'd fallen ill. The emperor offered a gentle reassurance. You two are truly devoted brothers. When I return, I'll have the Internal Affairs Bureau send someone to check in on him. Hearing their exchange, unease began creeping into my heart. They hadn't stopped Lin Gao's pitiful ploy at all. Instead, they were using it to gain leverage, exchanging his illness for two high-ranking governor appointments in Liang Prefecture and Sin Prefecture. I glanced toward the three inside the hall. Consort Liang's expression was unwilling. She clearly wasn't in favor of this plan. Which meant, it was Li Lia's idea. I understood, but this wasn't the outcome I'd wanted. Just the thought of Lin Gao playing the victim while soaking in the comforts of the cold palace made my blood boil. I leaned toward Madame Liu and whispered. Mama, I have one more task to take care of. She nodded. Go. They're almost done eating. Be quick. By the time I returned to the courtyard, the emperor was already preparing to leave. I deliberately stepped behind a large tree and rustled the leaves to make noise. The sudden sound drew attention. Li Dukton, the chief eunuch at the emperor's side, shouted sternly. Who's hiding over there? Come out. Feigning fear, I rushed out from behind the tree and fell to my knees. As I knelt, a bundle in my arms tumbled to the ground. Li Dukton immediately stepped forward, shielding the emperor. The expressions of Li Lia, Consort Liang, and Madame Liu all changed at once. Consort Liang was the first to speak. Your Majesty, please forgive her. This maid just entered my palace recently. She's clumsy and didn't mean to bump into you. But the emperor's mood was still good. He smiled and gently pushed Li Dukton aside. What's in that bundle? I lowered my head and said nothing, trembling all over. Li Dukton didn't wait for an order. He strode forward and kicked the bundle open. Blood-stained cloth and tattered, gore-soaked trousers spilled out across the ground. The sight alone made people's hearts freeze. The emperor took a deep breath. Tears suddenly welled in Consort Liang's eyes. She recognized the garments. That was when I finally spoke. Please forgive me, Your Majesty. These are the clothes and bandages used to treat the second prince's wounds. His Highness didn't want her ladyship to feel distressed, so he told this servant to bury them quietly. I was just trying to find a place to hide them. The emperor stepped forward, eyes fixed on the bloodied fabrics. No words were needed. He could already imagine the pain his son must have endured. His gaze shifted to Li Lie's legs. His voice trembled. "Lier, does it still hurt?" Li Lie glanced at me, then replied softly. "No pain, father." But before he could finish, Consort Liang dropped to her knees. Tears streamed down her face. "Your Majesty. I only have Lier, one child. He's always been thoughtful, afraid to trouble me, afraid to burden you. But, how could he not feel pain? Every night, he writhes in agony, unable to sleep. Yet he says nothing, because he doesn't want me to worry. And someone even poisoned his medicine. But he still refused to tell you, afraid you'd be distressed." Her voice cracked with every word. "He just keeps suffering in silence. How can a mother bear to watch her child like this?" The Emperor's face darkened visibly. Especially at the word poison, it pierced the softest spot in his heart. This was exactly the outcome I wanted. When I saw Consort Liang's dissatisfied expression during the meal, I knew I had to act. In our past life, the Emperor had been too overwhelmed by court matters to notice the extent of Li Lie's injuries. By the time he visited, the wounds were already treated, he never saw the blood, never felt the severity. So I had kept these bloodied bandages and torn trousers, waiting for the right moment to let the Emperor see it all. If Lin Gao dared use the Martyr's Act, then I'd play the same game, and better. Consort Liang's reaction had also been predictable. She had long been seething over this, and had Li Lie not stopped her earlier, she might have stormed the imperial study herself. But today, the time was right. As expected, the Emperor trembled with fury. "Beast." That single word, everyone knew it was aimed at Lin Yao. Because no one in that courtyard doubted who was behind the poisoning. Even if it wasn't Lin Gao himself, it had to be someone from his faction. Li Lie calmly interjected. "Father, please don't be angry." Fortunately, the truth came to light in time. I was not harmed. Let us not dwell on this further, lest others be implicated. His magnanimity only made Lin Gao's cruelty more apparent. The scales within the Emperor's heart began to tilt. Just then, a young eunuch rushed in and knelt. "Your Majesty." The Empress is kneeling outside Songyang Palace, begging that a physician be sent to see the Crown Prince. She says, he may not last the night. The Emperor's face twisted in rage. He pointed at the eunuch and shouted. "Tell the Empress to return to Weiyang Palace immediately. If she dares plead for Lin Yao again, she can forget about remaining Empress. He's just running a fever and acts like he's dying. If that's the kind of son she raised, then let him die." And with that, he stormed off. The Empress was sent back. No physician was dispatched to Lin Gao. Only Songyang Palace received a box of medicine. Neither Consort Liang nor Madame Liu blamed me. Li Lie looked at me for a long moment before sighing. "From now on, stay in the inner court. Serve at my mother's side. Don't leave Songyang Palace." I nodded. Yes, I had been reckless. But I had no regrets. I'd ruined the Empress and Lin Yao's scheme. Now they'd surely mark me for revenge. Li Lie assigning me to serve Consort Liang was his way of protecting me. I expected retaliation, just not so soon. Barely half a month later, one of the Empress's trusted maids came to invite Consort Liang to Weiyang Palace. I followed her there. The Empress had likely been waiting. She and Consort Liang had never gotten along. Not even a few pleasantries were exchanged before Consort Liang cut her off coldly. "Spare me the nonsense. We all know why I'm here. Just say it." The Empress, unfazed by her bluntness, smiled. "I asked you here for one reason." Her eyes fell on me. That smile sent chills down my spine. "You must be Ha Tian. So obedient, so demure. Of course Li Duk Tone would take a liking to you." Consort Liang's brows furrowed. The Empress continued. Yesterday, Li Dukton came to me personally. He said he's quite fond of Lady Hatian, and hoped I could arrange something. He wishes to share a connection with her. I stiffened. She was actually pushing me toward Li Dukton, the emperor's most trusted eunuch. He'd served the emperor since childhood and was practically untouchable. By using his name, the empress was clearly trying to intimidate consort Liang. Li Dukton was no better than a beast. In our past life, the empress had handed over numerous palace maids to him under the guise of atonement for the crown prince. They were all ruined, bodies covered in bruises. Everyone in the palace knew, no one dared speak. I looked toward consort Liang, unsure how she would respond. The empress seemed confident. Surely, consort Liang wouldn't offend both her and Li Dukton over a mere maid. Bang! Consort Liang slammed the table and shot to her feet. She pointed straight at the empress. Qiu Shuyun. This is your last warning, keep your filthy hands out of my palace. I don't care if you hand your own maids over to the eunuchs as playthings. But if you dare so much as lay a finger on anyone in Songyang Palace, I'll cut off those hands myself. The empress's expression darkened. Consort Liang wasn't finished. You think I'm afraid of Li Dukton? I'll say this now, if you touch even a hair on Hatian's head, I'll burn Wei Yang Palace to the ground. Try me if you don't believe it. My reputation's already ruined, I've got nothing to lose. With that, she stormed out, dragging me with her. Behind us, the empress shattered the teacup in her hand in a fit of rage. On the way back to Songyang Palace, consort Liang turned to me and said sternly, no matter what happens from now on, you are not to leave this palace. Even if someone summons you, you must not go. I will handle everything for you. Hearing her nagging voice, I suddenly felt as though I had returned to my past life. Back then, I had been pregnant with Luke Jiap. One morning, while paying respects to the empress, I suffered a bout of nausea. Lin Gao raised his hand to strike me in front of everyone. No one dared to stop him, except consort Liang. She had scolded him with righteous fury. A man who beats a pregnant woman is less than a beast. Back at Songyang Palace, Li Lia and Madame Liu had already heard everything that had happened. Li Lia warned me to be more cautious and promised to think of a plan. Madame Liu cursed Li Dukton as heartless. Their kindness warmed my heart. And at the same time, I recalled all I knew about Li Dukton in my previous life. I needed a way to deal with this old fox. Before I could come up with a proper plan, a letter arrived, an invitation to meet in the cold palace at midnight. The signature read, Xuanji. I stared at the letter and let out a cold laugh. Had I not been reborn, I might have believed her concern was real. But now I saw it clearly for what it was, a trap. Still, I would go. To see what tricks they planned to play. When I arrived at the cold palace, Xuanji was already waiting by the gate. Her expression darkened the moment she saw me. Why are you so late? She snapped. I glanced at her. There were bruises blooming on her face. What are you looking at? She barked. I smirked. Looks like Xuanji had begun to enjoy the blessings of serving Lin Yao. Why did you call me here? I asked. She quickly brushed off her annoyance and replied. There's good news for you. I said nothing, just stared. Unbothered, she continued. A nobleman is very fond of you. At that moment, a man stepped out from behind a rockery nearby. It was Li Dukton, the chief eunuch. He smiled. Good evening, Lady Hatian. Xuanji rushed to flatter him. Eunuch, I've brought her for you. So, about that matter we discussed. Li Dukton smiled indulgently. I'll speak well of you to Her Majesty when I return. Xuanji bowed repeatedly. Thank you, eunuch. Thank you so much. I looked at him. So, you serve the Empress, do you? He chuckled darkly. About sharing a connection with me, what do you say, Lady Hatian? He began walking slowly toward me. I didn't panic. Aren't you afraid the Emperor will find out, eunuchly? He sneered. This is hardly something a lowly maid like you needs to worry about. He reached out, trying to touch my face, but I stepped back, out of reach. His face darkened. Don't refuse a toast only to drink a penalty. In this forbidden palace. A voice cut through the cold air behind me. Trying to share a connection with my people. Eunuchly, how bold you are. From the shadows emerged Madame Liu, followed by Li Lia and the Emperor himself. Li Dukton's face went white as a sheet. He dropped to his knees with a loud thud. Xuanji, realizing the setup had failed, slipped away as fast as she could. I didn't care. Tonight, I'd caught the real fish. The Empress and Li Dukton assumed Xuanji and I were still close. They had used her to lure me out. But they didn't know that the two of us were now enemies, fire and water. I had known from the start it was a trap. So I'd made my own preparations. Li Lia had first gone to the Emperor, saying he missed his brother and wanted to visit Lin Yao. The Emperor, pleased at the show of brotherhood, came along. Discovering that his trusted eunuch was in league with the Empress, that alone was enough to ignite his wrath. Li Dukton was finished. And the Empress would lose her most powerful hand. Sure enough, by the next day, word spread. Li Dukton slipped and drowned while passing by the lotus pond. The Emperor blamed the Empress for negligence in managing the harem. He then gave Consort Liang partial authority to oversee the 6 palaces. After all this, Consort Liang began calling me her koi fish. Ever since I arrived, their fortune had turned. As for Li Lia, the way he looked at me always carried a quiet curiosity. The Empress, after this lesson, finally settled down, for now. Li Lia's legs recovered swiftly. He could now walk normally again. Consort Liang and Madame Liu were overjoyed. Only I remained heavy-hearted. Around this time in my past life, war had broken out in the northern territories. Li Lia went to the front and never returned. Even now, though his legs were fine, swords had no eyes. Nothing was guaranteed. I worried for several days. Then, as expected, word arrived. The Ngoa Luan tribe from the north had invaded, capturing 3 cities in quick succession. The situation was dire. Just like before, Li Lia volunteered for the front lines. The Emperor agreed. Consort Liang wept for days, but what could she do? Men of valor belonged to the battlefield. That evening, I was on night duty. As I gazed absent-mindedly at the moon, a voice called from behind. What's the true story between you and the deposed crown prince? I turned, alert. It was Li Lia, standing not far behind, his dark eyes shining like stars. I said nothing. He didn't press the matter. Instead, he stepped beside me and said quietly. I can see it, your hatred for him. But that's your business. I won't pry. Still, there's something I've wanted to ask. That day, when he used his pitiful little act, and all I got were 2 governorships in exchange, did that disappoint you? I remained silent. These 2 prefectures, Li Lia said, have long been under the control of the Empress's family. The people there suffer unbearable hardship from exorbitant taxes and cruel governance. Father knows of it, of course. But to those in power, these things are mere inconveniences, not injustices. I won't claim I'm a paragon of virtue, he continued quietly, but, if this trade can give the people of those prefectures a better life, even just a little, then I will accept it. If it means saving tens of thousands. He walked slowly to the steps and sat down. I believed him. This was the kind of man Li Lia was. But I looked at him and said, Your Highness, have you ever considered that sometimes saving tens of thousands may not be as important as eliminating one? Lin Yao is cruel. If he takes the throne, the suffering of the people will only grow. Those two prefectures have endured years of oppression. They don't want fleeting kindness, they want lasting peace. Lilia froze. He murmured. Saving tens of thousands may not be as important as killing one. He had always been kind, even after everything Lin Gao had done to him. He never once harbored the intent to kill. But fate had already bound them together. Only one of them could live. A long silence passed before Lilia finally stood, clarity returning to his eyes. Little one, your words make sense. Take care of my mother for me. And take care of yourself too. Wait for my return. The next day, Lilia departed. Tension thickened in the palace with each passing day. The battlefront in the northern territories brought only bad news. Consort Liang could barely sleep. Madame Liu sighed constantly. The court ministers began submitting memorials, begging His Majesty to consider peace with the Ngoa tribe. But such a treaty would mean surrender, admitting defeat and giving up territory. It was a humiliating proposal. Naturally, the emperor rejected it outright. Yet after 3 consecutive days of defeat, his temper grew increasingly unstable. Compared to Consort Liang and Madame Liu's unease, I remained calm. The beginning of this war had been equally rough in my past life. It wasn't until Lilia's army arrived a month later that the tide began to turn. He secured multiple victories, forcing a stalemate and halting the Ngoa advance. But then, the emperor fell ill. Lin Gao and the empress seized the opportunity, spreading rumors that Lin Gao had been wrongly punished. As a result, he was released from the cold palace. Lin Gao immediately began pushing for peace negotiations, and to sabotage Lilia. He deliberately disrupted military supplies, which eventually led to Lilia's death on the battlefield. Now, as another wave of bad news arrived from the front, Lin Gao struck again. He submitted a memorial proposing a marriage alliance as a peace offering, and even volunteered to negotiate personally with the Ngoa. His proposal was met with approval from most court officials. The emperor summoned him to the imperial study. Not long after, the palace was abuzz with news. Lin Gao had suggested sending Princess Duk Jung, daughter of the late emperor, to marry into the Ngoa as a gesture of peace. I wasn't surprised. In my past life, after Lilia died, it was Duk Jung who was forced to become the peace offering. Princess Duk Jung was the daughter of the late emperor. Though technically the current emperor's younger sister, they had a significant age gap. She was only 17 now. After the late emperor's passing, Duk Jung had remained reclusive in her palace. Few in the court remembered she existed. Most considered her expendable, but I knew better. In my past life, when she was sent away, the emperor had coughed up blood and collapsed. It was only then that everyone realized how deeply he loved his little sister. After that, the emperor distanced himself from Lin Gao for several years. That's why this time, I needed to find a way to pull Princess Duk Jung onto Lilia's side. If she supported him, he would have a powerful ally to counter Lin Gao. Your Grace, our survival depends on this. I found Consort Liang and spoke urgently. She had been worried for days. The moment she heard my words, her expression changed. What's happened? Lin Gao has proposed peace. If the emperor agrees, he'll surely regain his title. But His Highness is still fighting on the northern front. If Lin Gao starts delaying military supplies, he could die, I finished. Consort Liang frowned. The emperor is still watching. Lin Gao wouldn't dare. I shook my head. This peace proposal was his idea. He won't let the second prince succeed. If he's pushed to the edge, he'll do whatever it takes. Consort Liang's brows furrowed deeper. She understood, Lin Gao truly was capable of such a thing. What do you think we should do? Consort Liang looked at me intently. In response, I pulled a letter from within my robes and handed it to her. She glanced at it, her brows slightly furrowed. This is our last chance, I said. For us, and for the second prince. She fell silent. After a long pause, she nodded. Come with me to the imperial study. I'm sure those two are already there discussing the marriage alliance. Together, we entered the imperial study. Inside, a beautiful young girl was weeping before the emperor. Standing off to the side were Lin Gao and the empress. Elder brother, is there really no other way? The girl was none other than Princess Dukjung. The emperor sighed, his expression helpless. Your Majesty, Consort Liang stepped forward, perhaps we should not speak of this marriage just yet. At her words, everyone turned to her. Lin Gao was the first to sneer. Your Grace, the harem must not meddle in state affairs. The empress added with a smirk. Sister Liang, this isn't something you understand. Don't disgrace yourself. Consort Liang said nothing. She simply knelt and presented the letter. This is from Lier, it contains his words for your Majesty. A young eunuch stepped forward and delivered the letter to the emperor. He opened it, read it carefully, and sighed. At last, one of my sons makes me proud. Everyone was curious. But Princess Dukjung, whose fate was most entwined, stepped forward without care for protocol and read it herself. As her eyes scanned the lines, they lit up. She whispered aid. The vassal defends the border, the king guards the nation. Soldiers die with honor on the battlefield, no surrender, no tribute. Our song shall revive great Liang's glory. 100,000 souls shall protect this land. Lin Gao and the empress turned pale. Lin Gao stepped forward to speak, but the emperor cut him off. No more. My mind is made up. There will be no peace treaty, we will fight to the end. If I must trade a daughter for peace, then when I die, how can I face our ancestors? Princess Dukjung, overcome with emotion, looked at her brother. Elder brother, we of the Li family stand and die, but we will never live on our knees. Lier is a true descendant of the Li line, worthy of the crown. Then her gaze turned toward Lin Gao. The battle hasn't even reached its worst, and someone is already selling off kin for their own safety. Despicable. Lin Gao's face darkened. I did this for the people of Great Liang. He protested. Such noble ideals, the princess mocked. Shameless. She didn't give him a chance to respond, she turned and walked away. As she passed Consort Liang, she inclined her head slightly. From now on, I will visit your grace more often. You've raised a son better than most can claim. Lin Gao's face turned the color of ash. But what could he do? The next day, during court, the emperor read Li Lie's letter aloud. No one dared mention peace again. Hope ignited across the court. And then came the fifth war report, a victory. Li Lie's forces had just arrived at the northern front, and had already struck the Ngoalwan with such force that they couldn't respond. In the 10 days that followed, Great Liang's army claimed 6 more victories and recaptured 3 cities. Li Lie's name resounded across the armies, and throughout the court. The emperor beamed at every audience. Lier truly is the son who resembles me most. Consort Liang and Madame Liu rejoiced. Only I remained wary. Lin Gao was a venomous man. He wouldn't allow this to continue. If he couldn't defeat Li Lie on the battlefield, he would try something else, perhaps even against the emperor himself. And with Li Lie away at war, the court lacked a clear protector. If Lin Gao wanted to act, it had to be now, before Li Lie returned victorious and claimed the title of crown prince. I knew him too well. And so, I went to see Xuanji. When she saw me, her face twisted. What do you want? She looked worn, her face bruised and battered, more so than before. Did the crown prince hit you again? I asked. Like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, she hissed. Nonsense. His Highness treats me well. He said he wants me as his crown princess. I glanced at her stomach. Oh. Are you carrying his heir already? At that, her eyes flickered, but she composed herself. It's none of your concern. Why are you here? I smiled. No reason. Just came to check in. With that, I left. My goal had been achieved. That night, just after midnight, the palace erupted into chaos. The cold palace was on fire. Lin Gao and a maidservant, both stark naked, had run out in panic. When the news reached me, I was finally at ease. Earlier, I had deliberately baited Xuanji with talk of pregnancy. If she wanted status, she'd need to carry a child, and to do that, she'd need to drug Lin Gao. I bribed the cold palace guards. When the two were in the midst of their act, someone lit a small fire, just enough to raise alarm. As people rushed to put it out, they caught the two of them in the act. The next day, the emperor stripped Lin Gao of his title, demoting him to Prince of Lu Lang, and exiled him to his fiefdom. It was clear to all, Lin Gao was finished. The true crown prince was Li Lie. 3 months later, Li Lie returned victorious, presenting a letter of surrender from the Ngoal tribe. The emperor was overjoyed. At court, he formally named Li Lie as crown prince. Then, Li Lie submitted a second document, a stack of letters. Correspondence between Lin Gao and the Ngoal royal family. Letters that began after he was confined to the cold palace. They even contained maps of Great Liang's borders. No wonder the Ngoal advanced so easily, they had detailed intel. The plan was laid bare. Lin Gao would help them capture 3 cities, then return as the negotiator and reclaim his position with false merit. The emperor was furious. He threw Lin Gao into Tian prison, along with the empress and her clan, who were all complicit. Back at Songyang Palace, I heard the news and felt joy surge in my chest. I was especially happy for Li Lie. Had this been the Li Lie of before, he might have stayed quiet, told the emperor in private, even sparing Lin Gao. That night was the grand banquet to reward the army. Consort Liang wanted me to attend, but I refused. Instead, I went to Tian prison. There, I saw Xuanji. She was in complete disarray, muttering to herself. No, it can't be. He was supposed to be emperor. I'm the one who was reborn. She's gone mad, said the guard beside me. Execution's tomorrow. Xuanji saw me. She scrambled up, eyes gleaming. You're here to save me, aren't you? I smiled gently. I came to see you, one last time. Goodbye. No, save me. Please, I was wrong. I turned to the guard. Let's go. She stared at my back with desperate, hollow eyes. Lin Gao caused a scene earlier too, broke his legs trying to fight back. He's a criminal now, you're not allowed to see him, the guard added. No need, I said quietly. Seeing Lin Gao only makes me sick. Seeing those who once trampled others now meet their end, it was enough. When I returned to Songyang, someone was standing outside my chambers. Under the moonlight, I saw his face clearly. Li Lie. You're back, he said softly. I bowed. Greetings, Your Highness. He took something from his robes, a letter. You wrote this, didn't you? It was the letter I gave Consort Liang, the one that changed everything. I said nothing. Strange, he smiled faintly. Your words mirrored my thoughts exactly. I smiled wryly. In my past life, that was the last letter he ever wrote. Of course our thoughts were the same, the words were his. Li Lie folded the letter carefully, tucking it close to his chest. Then he looked at me and asked, seriously. Would you? I quickly interrupted. This servant does not wish for that. He didn't take offense. He simply inhaled deeply and nodded. Then, would you become my mother's adopted daughter? So you can visit her from time to time and keep her company. I knelt. This servant would be honored. He turned away. I know you dislike the palace. Tomorrow, you'll leave. I'll have father grant you the title of county princess. You'll be free to come and go, but always welcome beside my mother. Thank you, your highness. His figure trembled faintly, but he said nothing more and walked away. I remained kneeling for a long time. I knew what he had wanted to say. Maybe it was just a passing thought. Or maybe he truly meant it. But I had made my choice. I did not wish to spend my life trapped behind palace walls. Respect and distance, I whispered into the quiet courtyard. The end.